Over the past few years, we've had all sorts of cars that have filled new niches, and it would appear SsangYong has created another.
Want to guess what this new niche is called? Nope, it's called the SUV estate.
SsangYong says the Tivoli XLV combines the look of an SUV with the practicality of an estate car. Behind the hyperbole though, the XLV is little more than a Tivoli with a big boot.
And it's the boot where we start. Now with the normal Tivoli, you could just call the boot to be of an average size, but the XLV is much larger. It's also got a much wider boot opening as well. Now we've got a movable boot floor and overall the space is pretty good, nice and square. We've got some extra loading space down here. We've got some bungee cords to store a few extra items as well, and we can also use the movable boot floor. So if we lift this up, we've got some extra storage. Now in this particular car we've got a space saver spare wheel, but if you don't have that fitted, you've got some extra space. Obviously you can always fold this down, and when the boot is in its standard position you've got a completely flat loading area. Let's fold that back up. And the first thing to mention is these door openings. Now, they open quite wide, which is great if you're loading in those child seats. What's not quite so good, however, are these ISOFIX points. They're really tucked away. There's no really easy access, which is a bit of a shame. However, that's a small gripe. Let's get in. And that seat is set up in my driving position. I'm just over 5'10", and I've got a good amount of knee room. Headroom is pretty good. These seats are actually really quite comfortable. We've got a couple of cup holders here. If you want to carry 3 people, that's not a problem because there's an almost flat floor, meaning there's loads of foot room. And yeah, it's quite comfortable sitting in here. There's a good amount of shoulder room. Headroom is pretty good. One strange thing about the Tivoli though are these strange bungee cords. They're in the boot as well, and I'm not entirely sure how practical they are. However, that's the only thing I've got to complain about the back seats.
You won't have any difficulty choosing your Tivoli XLV as there's just one well-equipped trim level. Heated front and rear leather seats, sat-nav, a rear parking camera, keyless start, roof rails and a contrasting roof are all standard features.
Up front is identical to the standard Tivoli, so design-wise it's a big step on from SsangYong's of old, especially with this black piano trim and sort of gunmetal grey plastic. What's not quite so good is the material quality in here. Now there's quite a lot of scratchy and hard plastics in here. It's not quite as good as this nearest car's rivals. Having said that, everything does feel well screwed together and it doesn't feel as though it's going to fall apart anytime soon.
Just like the trim, there's one engine choice, 113 brake horsepower, 1.6 litre diesel. There's a choice of a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed automatic, and you can have 2-wheel drive or switchable 4-wheel drive. Our car is the 2-wheel drive version, and it'll be the go-to choice for most buyers, as it's punchy around town and on the motorway. The problem is you won't be getting anywhere near the claimed 63 mpg. We only got 40. All Tivoli XLVs get something called Smart Steer. You can change the steering weighting from normal, comfort and sport.
Now I think the marketing department being a little bit over-optimistic with its Smart Steer system, because when you start pressing it, it doesn't make any difference to the steering whatsoever. Which is not a huge problem really, because the Tivoli XLV steers adequately enough and overall it's an enjoyable car to drive.
That doesn't mean there aren't a few issues though.
Now the engine may be punchy enough, but refined it ain't. Now when you're cruising it's absolutely fine, but when you're driving around town it's a little bit too vocal for my liking. Also, we've got the auto gearbox, and whilst it slips between gears perfectly fine, there is, especially at low revs, a little bit of gearbox whine. In actual fact, this sounds, well, around town, this car sounds a little bit like a London black cab. It's a little bit coarse for my liking. Overall, I'd stick with the perfectly decent 6-speed manual.
For the most part, the ride is fine, but over country roads it can get a bit jiggly. That said, body control is well controlled on faster roads.
There are a few odd things in here, the first of which is the HDMI cable down here on the centre console. Why do I need that? And why is it there? Also, the controls down here, it's a little bit difficult to operate them whilst on the move. One of the controls is memory. I mean, what's that about? It's also a little bit difficult to get comfortable in here because the steering column only adjusts up and down, not in and out. Another strange thing in here is if you want to take manual control of the gearbox, you don't slot the gear lever over. There's a little switch on the side of the lever which you push up and down to change gears. Very odd. And also, this car's got keyless entry and start, but you still get a flip-out key. Now, I know SsangYong's not the only company that does this, but it's really very annoying.
Lastly, it's the looks. Styling is always subjective, but compared to the standard Tivoli, the XLV's larger back end looks a little bulbous and a bit tacked on.
The Tivoli XLV may well have a few interesting quirks and be a little bit rough around the edges. It's not as refined as its rivals, for example, but there's no getting away from the fact that if you want a small SUV that has a big boot and doesn't cost a lot of money to buy in the first place, the XLV fits the bill almost perfectly. Now, if you want to watch a review of the car the XLV is based on, the normal SsangYong Tivoli, click the video window on the left, or the video window on the right for one of Carbuyer's favourite small SUVs, the Renault Kadjar. Click at the top for our latest video and on our logo to subscribe.